See what I see? I only see everybody's picture. I don't see what
You,
she's
you
sharing.
shouldn't. Now you should see it.
Okay, now
There
I
we
see
go.
it. Okay,
Got it? Yeah. So I
got
don't
it.
record all your faces yet. I really don't do that to you. I
Okay.
promise. If you want to be on camera, you can do it yourself. But that's
Yes, and
okay.
then
Everybody see it?
yes.
Yes.
Okay, so this, I don't know, depending on which you went to school, this is something a lot of my students are just not aware of. Does anybody know what the logic model is?
Mm-mm.
Okay.
Go ahead.
So the logic model, go ahead, I heard a voice.
No, I was just gonna say I saw it like once in one of my classes, but it wasn't really stressed. Like we had to do it for like research too, for like a
Exactly.
hot second, but it wasn't really taught like in an effective like fashion.
Okay. So you will see this, and you won't see the chart, but you'll see the question. So many people are like, I have no idea what that means. So this is called a logic, and it is used either with program evaluation or community research. Okay, so this is the way it works is, let's say you're doing a community research project and you're kind of wanting to make sure that you involve the community. So you start off with a situation, the needs, the assessment. What's the problem? Who are the stakeholders? And things you want to consider, the mission, the vision, the mandates, the resources, all of that. But that all comes from the community. Okay, your stakeholders or everyone is involved. So this logic model is making sure that everyone is involved in the community. Remember, when you're doing any of these whether it's locality development or community organization, you don't live in that community. You don't get to come in and tell people in that community how they're going to live. Okay? And we know if community doesn't have buy-in the same way as clients, they don't care. You've got to have buy-in. So then, and everything I send today, I'll put in the box. Also, you get the videotape, but any of the things I'll use, I'll put a link in the box. Okay. So as you look at this, then the inputs. So let's say that I am a community organizer. One of the things, let me back up. So one of the things I really liked about Barack Obama, and whether you like him as a president or not, he really was a community organizer before he ran for office. He lived in Chicago, and what he did is he really worked with low-income families to help them get some. He worked actually in the projects, and he really worked with them to help them get some really fair and equal treatment, like heat and basic things. So that's where that picture comes from. So if you use that model, we look at kind of our needs assessment. Most often what happens is one client will come to us, or we'll see, we're trying to help one family and we see it's a bigger issue. So then when he realized that many of these families didn't have proper heat and air conditioning, he went back to the community. He kind of gathered the community members together to see what the problem was. Was it a big problem? Was it a huge problem? So it was a big deal. The inputs he got, that is the inputs of everybody. So he included like the people that worked in the housing facilities, people who are around. He looked at how much time, how much money, the research, all of those things are the inputs that you're putting into this model. The outputs are what happens. Okay, so my inputs is, if we put some time, staff, and do some research on really what's going on, that is what's going to give us our output. Okay, and then we have outcomes, which are short, medium, and long term. And probably back in graduate school, you had to kind of work on that and figure out what it was. You don't have to do that for the test. You just have to know some of the terminology. Okay, so this whole terminology is called throughput. All of that is the throughput. Okay, so inputs come in, they're the community members, they're all the stakeholders, anyone who's involved in the community. My outcomes are then, what will happen? Who does this affect? Does it affect these people, these people? What can we do? And that's the outcome of all the inputs from the community. Okay, and then the outcomes, of course, we have long-term, short-term, and then what's the ultimate impact? What do we want to happen? And what Barack Obama wanted to happen at the end, of course, is he wanted the people to be treated fairly. It's nothing wrong with wanting to have heat in the winter, and they're paying their rent, and sometimes the tenants, the landlord just wouldn't get the furnace fixed. So things like that. My phone. My phone. Sorry about that. That was my kid. Okay, so the assumptions, you see that. You might see some of those terms off in the assumptions, and then my external factors. And they both go in and out, in and out. Okay, so this is it's called the program development, and this is the logic model. And we'll see that whether it's in a program, whether or not a program, or often in a research project as well. Okay. Okay, so then it just kind of gives you some brief on what logic models are, and I'll put this link in the box. So the way I usually tutor is we will spend probably the first half hour just going over some information, just trying to feed you some information. And the second part, you'll actually answer questions for me. And if you want to answer by speaking or in the chat box, either way is fine. But we'll do some mock questions to kind of see how well you've digested some of the information. Okay. So then, most people have used the APGAR book. That's actually one of my favorite books. She's got a really good stuff when it comes to I'll move my screen around. Okay, got like 1,000 windows open. I'm trying to move everybody between my two screens. Okay, so then, and we'll pick up a little bit of the APGAR. I will also send you this one also. I mean, this just kind of looks, again, some of the really important things that are usually on that test. Okay, so then. Okay. So in general, community practice, community organization practice uses the whole system. It's the society, the people that are living there, the social systems, the social action, all of those things are a big picture of community practice. So, you know, many times when you're in graduate school, you had a choice of like a macro or a micro. That's how I went a million years ago. But so all that is kind of looking at practicing in the community. It looks at the social power, the social structure, all the social change, all of those things that are really, really important when it comes to being in the community. Okay? So the tasks and goals are influenced by the organizational context. It really matters of what it looks like in the organization. Okay, and I will send you this. There's a lot of history on where it comes from. These are the terms you'll see a lot of times, the role, and you've seen the social worker roles many times. Enabler, okay, broker, expert, the advocate, the activist, the organizer, okay. Has anybody seen change agent?
Yes.
Okay, so the change agent is most often one of the terms that you'll see when it's a macro practice. A change agent doesn't usually work with an individual. I'm the agent of change to look at changing the big picture. You know, why are these people, you know, why don't they have fresh water? Why, you know, what is going on? Why is there not a bus in this community? So it really is about kind of getting the community together, helping them support each other, and we're just kind of helping them the facilitator. So my enabler, you're helping the community members use their own resources. My broker, I'm mediating between different groups. I always think, you know, I know all of you have lots of money, so your broker who pays the stock market for you and figures out where your money goes. That's what he does. So he kind of mediates, so that when you're playing that role, you mediate and negotiate between the community groups. Okay, so especially in locality development, and locality development is if I'm trying to work on building a playground in this area, that local area. And let's say the school is saying that we need a playground, and the community is saying we don't want to pay for it, etc. So that broker might work in between those two big institutions to kind of help figure it out what we're going to do. Advocate, activist, so those terms most people know. Okay. So here are the steps. Okay, so the problem-solving model is what we use. First of all, we're going to introduce ourselves to the group. Clarify why everyone is there. So, you know, you've put up these signs and you're going to have this community meeting and you want everyone to come. So you start yourself off with, hey, thank you for coming. I'm Pam Turner. I'm the social worker for this area. And I just really want to address some problems that have been brought to my attention. Because again, most often you don't live there. So those are not your problems, but you want to make sure the community takes ownership. Introduce yourself to the group. Clarify why everyone is there. Address problems. Help the group develop consensus on the problems to address. Okay. Help the group focus on a concrete problem that's immediate. Okay, so sometimes you'll get the people together and they'll say, the problem is all of our kids keep going to jail. Okay, and that really may be it, and that really may be what we're going to focus with the police department on. However, can we look at maybe is there a bigger problem? Is unemployment a problem? Is drug use on the rise? So what am I really looking at? So focus on the concrete problem, select a problem, and then we're going to look for alternative solutions, evaluate potential for public support, evaluate, monitor, and of course revise. Like every other program, we evaluate, monitor, and if we need to change it, we go back. That's how we do in all areas of social work, so community wouldn't be any different from that one. Okay, so locality development. Has anybody heard that term? So it really is just about that. It's development in that local area. Okay, so neighbors work aimed at improving the quality of the community life with the participation of the broad spectrum of people at the local level. So can anybody share where they've seen this maybe in their area or on the news or anything where they've seen kind of a locality development? Well, thanks. Really appreciate it. In my area, I live in downtown Chattanooga. I live in Chattanooga. And I think like most cities a few years ago, the inner city areas were, here at least, there was the whole crack epidemic and many people moved out. So the cities were kind of left empty and white flight. People moved out to the suburbs, and we're seeing a resurgence of people moving back to the city. So in our area, Chattanooga has become this growing city with, lots of new people, lots of new businesses. And then as that has developed, that has been an issue because we have issues like now with no affordable housing in the downtown area. And many of our elderly don't have transportation. They don't have a way to get around if they don't live in the city. So we're really having some concerns that, now it's the young hippie crowd and grandma who's lived there for, forever now can't afford a place to live. So we have one of the local colleges here is really kind of doing some on the ground locality development, looking at, how can we draw people to Chattanooga? We want it to be a great city. However, it's got to be affordable for the people who live here. So that's pretty much an example of what it looks like. The model is associated with the democratic process, universal participation, and the majority rule of consensus. So the part of the problem is getting the people that it matters most to the meetings. Okay. Because I've got the guys, the businessmen who certainly will show up because they want to fight what they believe in. But, I've got to get grandma to the meeting. I've got to get her to have buy-in. So if we're going to fight this fight, that she has buy-in and it's important to her, not just to me. Okay. So most recent practice built on understanding the democratic decision-making often involves mobilization of many constituents for change. Those are my voters. Okay. Groups as voters, residents, business, and nonprofit, all of those people really have to be on the same page. Okay. And it's a majority. That's the way it works. So we can't assume that my grandma doesn't want to vote. The assumption is that she's not aware of how much power she has. So I'm looking at locality development. I just want to make sure that everybody's on the same page there. Okay, again, some change, community integration, change strategy, tactics, boundaries, etc. Okay, so social planning, which is different than locality development, it emphasizes careful study of the community's political, social, economic, and all of the characteristics of the community. Okay, so formal organizations such as the council, the Unit Way, or other leadership are often taking part of this. So social planning is what happens when we are planning out a new area. We're trying to make a change. Okay, so the planning comes before social action. So problem solving, task oriented. My worker, the social worker, plays the role of the researcher, reporter, data analyst, program planner, program implementer, facilitator, etc. Okay, and then again, social action is different than planning. Okay, social action is now I've gone through this process of social planning, and now they're going to do some action. Okay, so social action is often what we are known for, like seeing Martin Luther King do, or people who also saw that non-violent change. Social action, how can we change this? And what can we do socially without, and what Martin Luther King and most people do is not to break the law, but to really change things, okay? So it requires a target, clearly cut, easily explainable goals. So if you remember reading about the 60s, the sit-ins in the 60s, there we go, try that. That was about, sitting in at the counters. So that, the law said Black people had the right to eat at the counters. However, that didn't happen, especially in the South. So social action was when you cut the people and then you go sit in at the counter. Okay? It wasn't breaking the law. It was really just making an impact that this is not okay. We've got to do something to make sure these areas are willing to uphold the law. Okay, the target is usually community institutions that can control or allocate funds, community resources, and power. The clients are usually those who lack a social and economic power, which is, we see that. They're typically disadvantaged and they are oppressed. They oppress few resources and may often lack organizational experience. Okay, so that is when, as a social worker, you're kind of getting everyone together. I'm going to use that social action model. It's been used a lot to really just make those changes. Okay. The goal is that, again, is to kind of shift the power and the resources. You've got to change strategy. Your worker role in this one is you're going to be an advocate, an activist, a negotiator. Your tactics might be conflict, confrontation, contest, or direct action. All those are things. So social action is actually doing something. Okay, and then my social reform, that is when I'm really trying to change things permanently based on my social action. I work with other organizations. The goal is to develop coalitions or various groups to pressure people for change. Okay, anybody want to share a time maybe that's happened or you've seen that? It's a talkative group. Okay, so anyway, some of the sponsors, some of the things we've seen, like professional associations, the NASW, public interest groups, Ralph Nader's organization on child welfare leagues. So those are the things that we really want social reform. We're trying to change things to make it fair for everybody. That's that whole social justice. That's what we do. Is make it fair. The options should be available for everybody. Okay. Let's just kind of look at those stages because sometimes you'll see those stages pop up. Okay. So the goal always is to make sure that you are not planning it. Someone else is involved. So you are not funding it and you are not running it. You're welcome to advocate and facilitate. However, you don't live in this community. It's always how we decide those answers. You do not live in this community. Okay. So then the stages, your first phase is organize members who may lack community consciousness. They're kind of not aware of what's going on. Then you find your worker might identify and work with some community problems. The task, who gets what. Secondary view is each phase. Secondary task view is a secondary during the early phases. The primary focus is on the process, socialization, who's involved, etc. Okay. There's lots of lots of information. I'm not going to go over it, but I will send it to you. There's a history of community organization, where that came from, which is just pretty cool in general. Okay. This talks about when the work for welfare. I've seen some questions on that, how things were in the past and how they are now. And if you're young enough to not remember TANF, AFDC is that replaced TANF, and that welfare to work for that happened under Bill Clinton. The law is there. Does anybody know what that law says now? It's the current law regarding how long you can receive assistance, or the AFDC.
You can receive it for 5 years. Right?
You got it, 5-year lifetime.
61, unless you get an extension.
You got it. So I didn't hear that last one, but it's 5 years, total lifetime, 2 years, and then no more than this. Two consistent years and no more than 5 years in a lifetime. Okay. I hope that's what you said. And is that hard and fast rule? No. There are lots of people and lots of reasons that people extended before. But if you're new in the social work field, what used to happen before this is there were, when I first started social work in the, I got my master's in 91 and I got my LCSW in 93. When we first started, you could be on welfare forever. There was no incentive to work. And many of my students at the time only wanted to be old enough to get their own apartment and their own check. So at some point back in the day, if you were 15, 16, had a baby, that guaranteed you your own apartment, as well as making sure that you got food stamps and government assistance to raise your children at 15. So that was how it used to be, and there was really no incentive to get off of that. We had like paper, big old paper papers then, big old folders, and the chart would be like huge. It'd be like 7 or 8, inches thick. We started a new binder because all you had to do was be old enough to get on the welfare system again and get your own check. So it really was this cycle that we saw over and over again. So workfare to welfare changed that under Bill Clinton. Okay. There are a lot of states that were grandfathered in later. I work in North Georgia. I live in Tennessee and work in North Georgia. And parts of North Georgia were the people that were, there were so many people on those welfare rolls who were getting TANF. They got an extension for like 10 years. So while the rest of the country had already gone through that, some of the areas, it took them 10 years to kind of figure it out. Okay. So some bigger programs, of course, Medicare, Medicaid, public assistance, Social Security, all of those things. Okay. The Affordable Health Care Act, that's 2010. HIPAA, HIPAA is part of the Affordable Health Care Act under Obama. Okay. HMOs came in. HMOs came to regulate. So again, you've probably not been in the field long enough, but what used to happen is if when it came to treatment, so people could see me who had lots of money, people who had lots of really good insurance could come see me at my reasonable customary rate of $150 an hour, and most insurances would pay for that. There was very little supervision of how I treated them. It really was kind of like the way, if you remember going back to the doctor, you didn't have to answer to anybody. So that's when we saw the insurance reform bill come along and HMOs came along, and then HMOs made everyone answer to how they were treating them. So you had to have a diagnosis, you had to justify your sessions. So HMOs paid a whole lot less than standard insurance, and more people were likely to seek treatment. So I share with my students that when I first started in the practice, we had a contract with American Airlines, the big airline. We had a great contract with them. I saw all the pilots, I saw the flight attendants. It was great. They paid me well. It was good. When HMOs came through, and this was probably in the early, late 90s, that I was finally able to actually even see the baggage handlers and their kids. Because what that did is it made it more affordable for everyone. And more accessible for everyone. So that was the biggest change of having HMOs. And for a long time, then only the health insurances had that had to answer to someone. Medicare, Medicaid did not. So I worked in private practice, and we would, because there were no guidelines, very limited guidelines, we could see if a mother had 5 kids, we could see all 5 kids on the same day, bill them for individual sessions, bill them for group sessions, bill them for the psychiatrist, all in one day. So it's really that simple. Okay, so that was kind of how that worked. And HMOs have changed that. So now there's accountability. The downside of that is, the most HMOs, what they'll pay is about $75 an hour as opposed to $150. So not only did it affect mental health people, it also affected doctors, because doctors who were used to kind of billing and deciding and didn't have to really answer to anybody suddenly had to answer to somebody. And that was a very different perspective from many of our doctors. Okay. Questions? Am I saying something am I repeating knowledge that you already know? Something new? Talk to me.
No.
Is it a yes or a no? What did I hear?
No.
No, I'm not repeating anything new.
Right.
Okay, thank you. So, let's see here. I think one of the things, at least for me, is I actually lived through this change. So I was able to actually see how things changed. And most, not only most doctors, but also then anyone who's in private practice saw their income change because, we were used to charging, huge bucks, and suddenly I can't do that anymore.
Mm.
Okay. But again, I was able to see clients that I could not see before. It opened up those therapy practices for everyone. So when Obamacare happened, then we have now seen the care even go further. Part of Obamacare then says that if that the government will pay, or your insurances will pay for then your addiction services as well as any mental health issues, and that didn't always cover that. So that's why we've seen such a change in the coverage for people who have such issues.
Mm.
Okay, so that's kind of my overview of that. So I'm going to do some questions. If you guys could just chime in for me, I'd really appreciate it. This question was on my Facebook post. And a lot of people got it wrong. Everyone see that?
Mm-hmm.
Everyone see it's a Word doc. Can you see it? Do you see a Word doc? A group of adolescent boys?
Yes.
Okay. So if you've answered this already, answer again and we'll kind of talk about it. So a group of adolescent boys and their girlfriends regularly drop in to play basketball at the Greenwood Neighborhood House, a community social work center with varied programs of activities for children and adolescents. The group has recently been joined by several boys who are known to be involved with drugs and who are thought to be dealers. The agency outreach workers concerned that the group might begin to shift its focus from sports and recreation to more destructive activities. In addressing this issue, the social worker might, what do I do? A, discuss the problem with the new boys and convince them to leave the group. B, invite the entire group to join a psychoeducational group on drug and alcohol abuse. C, discuss the implications of drug use with some of the group's informal leaders, recommend that they exclude the new boys. Or D, arrange to develop a close relationship with the group and try to involve them with the center programs. What do I do with that one? 8, 1, 2, 3, or 4. If I can get some type in, if you don't want to say anything, give me some feedback.
Don't worry about it. That's okay. No, I can't put it back. Just eat what you can.
Is it 2?
Tell me why.
This is my thought process. I don't have any reason.
Well, you've got to tell me why. You just can't have
Well,
I'm going to take you wrong right until you tell me why. So what in the question tells me, or what in knowledge tells me why you think that's the answer?
Well, discussing the problem with the 2 new boys and convincing them to leave the group, you want to encourage the boys to stay in the group. This is a neighborhood community center. I mean, I assume you're going to have troubled teenagers in there. So trying to get them to leave the group is not good. Discussing the implications of drug use with some of the group's informal leaders, recommending that they exclude the new boys. Once again, you're trying to exclude the new boys when community groups try to keep people in, the population in that they're aiming for. Arranging to develop a closer relationship with the group and try to involve them with more center programs. It doesn't sound like relationship is an issue or the amount of programs. I didn't see anything regarding that in the question. I saw primarily drug use with the teenagers was a program, or an issue. So therefore, psychoeducational groups about drug and alcohol abuse would probably be the most appropriate answer.
Anybody else want to have an opinion on that?
I really like the way she just sort of justified her answer.
Okay.
Kudos.
Good answer. And it is too. And that's it. Okay. Because as a social worker, we really don't want to turn people away, do we? However, I've got to have a bigger picture. I want everyone to be safe. Okay. So I have to make sure that everyone is safe. And the best way to do that is really kind of making sure that everyone understands these are the rules, and then educating. Okay. And don't we do in general always, don't we assume that many of our clients just don't know any better? So whether it's child abuse or any other issues that we just think, okay, so let me do what I need to do and educate them. Okay. Any feedback on that one? Okay, let me give you that one. Okay, let me see that one. Okay, so one of the things that I really, with my students who struggle with finding the answer in the STEM, especially the vignettes, and you know that 60 to 65% of the tests are vignettes. I always suggest that you do the who, what, when, where, and why. Okay, so if you're not really sure of how to answer those sometimes, like who and what's going on, when, and why am I here? What am I doing? Why am I doing this? Or what is the question asking me? Okay, so a group of adolescent girls comes to a neighborhood center and they ask the youth social worker for a room in which they can meet regularly. The group is not interested in joining the center, and the girls' comments clearly imply they want to use the room without interference from staff. The center's policy is to require registration of all participants and monitor groups while using the building. They're expected to report on their activities to the youth director and to ensure compliance with the center's policy and to permit staff to facilitate their activities. The social worker does not want to lose this opportunity to serve a local group. In the situation, what should she do? A, say nothing about the policy, register the group for a room, and trust her skills will persuade the girls to accept the policy. 2, discuss the value of center services to the group and suggest the girls talk over the situation among themselves and then make a decision. 3, arrange a meeting with the group to discuss their needs and the requirements and advantages of registering before they came to a final decision. Or 4, explain that the regulations are set up by the board of directors and they cannot be altered for any local group. Be brave, take a chance.
Is it 4? Explain the regulations are set by the board of directors and cannot be altered for any local group.
Anybody else want to respond?
I like 3 better, but I don't know if I'm right.
Okay, well, talk to me.
Oh, you want me to explain why I think it's 3?
Please, yes.
Well, I think it's important to inform the group about because it is I thought number 4 was way too harsh, so I thought 3 would be sort of persuading them in the right direction to follow the rules.
Okay. So what in the question helps me supports that?
Okay, good question. That she doesn't want to lose the opportunity to serve them.
She does not. Okay. So what I'm going to do is arrange a meeting with the group to discuss their needs and the requirements and advantages of registering before they came to the final decision. Mm-hmm. Do you see some advantages in there to registering? Am I missing that?
No, I do not see that.
Okay. So there's nothing in the STEM to support that answer.
Okay.
Okay. So as mean as it is, and I know that social workers were so kind and sweet, the answer really is 4. Okay. And I don't want to lose them. However, I don't want to lose my job either.
Okay.
Right? Okay. So I'm not breaking the policy for anyone because my kids like eating. I don't know about your kids or your people, your dogs. They like eating. I need my job. Okay. So that's what makes it 4, because it clearly says the group is not interested, and the rules are they're also expected to report the activities to the youth director to ensure compliance. Okay, compliance. Okay. So even if you did not know any of these answers, is there not a problem with a group of adolescent girls who don't want an adult around? That would set up red flags.
Hiding something.
Exactly. This is the red flags for me. Like, oh my gosh, all these girls are coming in, they're little girls and they don't want me around. Okay. So they don't want to join the center, and the girls' comments clearly imply they want to use the room without interference from staff. Okay. So those are to me are red flags. So while yes, this is probably, and I'll tell you on Facebook, most of my students missed it. They chose 3. The answer really is 4, because we're not used to having to be mean and set up the rules, but it looks at community social work or bigger picture. I've really got to make sure that I follow those rules.
So basically, because I got that one wrong when I saw it on the post, it's because you're sticking to policy, right?
Yes. And
Okay.
I'm not breaking policy. If I break policy, what happens to any liable actions? If something happens and those girls get hurt, who are they going to sue?
Me. Or,
Mhm.
I mean, the agency.
They're going to sue me if I didn't follow the agency's rules.
That's right.
Okay. If I follow the agency rules, the agency's going to have my back, because these are in at least the test world. So as long as I follow the rules, then they are going to support me because I follow the rules. The minute I break the rule, I'm on my own. Okay. And that's a concept for most of us, because we like, we want to do the best for everybody and get them in. Okay. There are a lot of questions here about the risk factor for violence. After we've 9/11 and we have seen several shootings and school shootings, these are more the newer questions that you'll see. And if you went to school again, not in the last 5 years, you might not be familiar with kind of the risk factors. So, which of the following is true about the risk factors for violence? And I see my D is missing, so I'm not really sure. But the following, what is true about the risk factors is they're positively associated with protective factors. My risk factors, let's see, you sent me something. Okay. My risk factors are making sure, let me just pull that up since I didn't get the whole question. So what we know now is when we are kind of identifying people that might be future school shooters, we have a list of kind of things that we know. Okay. So what we know is there are just some risk factors out there. They might have brought a weapon to school before. They might have been aggressive, some past disciplinary issues, some suspension perhaps at home. They might have a history of being violent, poor, bullied by peers, bullied of peers or younger youths, history of being bullying themselves, some drug or alcohol abuse, etc. Okay, and then some family risk factors, a history of family violence, history of weapon possessed by the family, severe inconsistent punishment. Those are all things that we look for. And again, I'll send you this when it comes to the risk of violence. And there are protective factors. So the protective factors include growing up in a pretty stable family, having friends, doing well in school. You can imagine all the things that are protective factors that even though I might be someone who's more likely to kind of share my anger, but there are definitely some things that provide me some protective factors. Okay.
Hey, Pam, did you change the screen? Because it's still showing for me the indirect practice.
I pulled up another one, so you might not see it, but I'll send you the link.
Okay.
Are you home now? Not driving anymore, I hope.
Yes, I'm home now.
Makes me feel better.
I think that's why I had to switch from the phone to the computer.
I'm gonna click out of this. Okay, so then let's go a few more of these. Okay, so then look at this one. This is more of an indirect practice as opposed to a community. And these are actually questions from old social work tests. That's where I get them from. So what we know is that many of these are repeated. Okay. So Mary is a 31-year-old nurse at a local hospital. A year ago, she cared for an AIDS patient. What's that question? Are you good? Do we see the screen? Yeah.
Yep.
Okay, making sure. Okay.
I can see it.
So Mary is a 31-year-old nurse at a local hospital. A year ago, she cared for an AIDS patient on her unit. Since then, she finds herself taking increasingly extreme measures to feel clean. At first, she concentrated on keeping her uniform from touching anything in her home except the inside of the washing machine, leaving her work shoes in the car and undressing just inside the door. Over the months, she began to scrub her car daily. OCD, right? We hear that? Some going on there. Okay. So over the months, she started to scrub her car interior daily. She couldn't sit on her bed unless she washed the bedclothes neatly, and found that the cleaning was taking up all of her free time. She decided that she would seek help from the hospital's EAP, Employee Assistance Program, and told the EAP social worker. So she told the EAP social worker, Tom, she knew all these concerns about germs was excessive, but she could not make herself stop. Tom suggested they begin a behavior modification approach to the program. What situation might he suggest? A, number one, Tom estimated to identify what changes would be most manageable for her. She began putting on the bed, on the clothes, etc. You can read that one. 2, Tom estimated to talk about her understanding that cleaning and excessive to explain all the reasons it didn't make sense. 3, Tom estimated to talk about her feelings about the caring for AIDS patients and the feelings about that. Tom estimated to review her life history to see how the illness had affected her personal attitude. So this is taking a behavior modification approach, changing the behavior. What strategy might she suggest? I see a 1,
2.
a 2.
Number 1.
I see a 1 and a 2. Okay, so tell me why 1 or tell me why 2.
1, because you're trying to modify her behavior, and because it's been so obsessive for her, you have to gradually do it. So number 1 is helping her change her behavior in slow increments so that she can eventually be okay with not doing it at all.
Okay. Next, one number 2. Come on, somebody.
I waver between 1 and 2, so I don't know. Can't explain myself.
Okay. So what? But so why did you choose 2? What in the question helped you choose 2?
Well, she's a nurse, and so she knows about the universal precautions. She just maybe needs to review them a little bit again and discuss all the reasons why it really doesn't make sense to clean because at least excessively like that, because that's not, I don't know. It's not how it works. I don't know.
Okay. So I do get that. I hear what you're saying. However, my question is a behavior modification approach. So when I'm using a behavior modification approach, am I using my cognitions? Am I thinking about it, processing it? I am.
CBT?
Okay.
Yeah,
So
CBT.
does it say CBT though?
No.
It just says a behavior.
Okay, so a behavior modification approach. Do I spend time on thinking about it or processing it?
No, you're modifying a behavior, so you're going to take action.
Exactly. Okay, so then what's my answer?
I said number 1.
It is 1. It is 1. Okay, did you get that? Okay, because the question clearly states it's a behavior modification approach. So we're looking at the EAP program, and many times you'll get these vignettes with all of the stuff in there, which is aid patient, etc. But the question is a behavior modification. That's all I need to look for. Okay, so we're thinking, oh my goodness, he's got AIDS, what do I do, etc. The only issue, well, not the only issue, but the important clue in this question is the behavior modification approach. So I'm not going to talk to review her life history. I'm not going to talk to her about our feelings. I'm not going to talk to her about our understanding of the process. That's my goal, is not to do that when I'm using a behavior modification approach. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay. Questions? Okay. So most often this is a pretty typical question where you're down to 2. So often there are 2 really wrong, 2 close to right. So then what you have to do is go back to the question to be able to justify or not justify why you chose that one. Okay. So then this one also. Okay. New client, Vincent Ricci, is sitting in the crowded waiting room of a hospital outpatient psychiatric clinic. Peter Barnes, a social worker assigned to this case, comes out to the waiting area to meet with the client for the first time, but he doesn't know which person to greet. According to HIPAA, an appropriate and effective way to identify the client is for the social worker to enter the waiting room and say what? 1, is Mr. Ricci here? 2, is Vincent here? 3, I'm Peter Barnes. I'm Peter Barnes. Peter Barnes, anyone waiting for me? Or is there anyone here for a first appointment? What do you do? I hear a 4.
3.
3.
3 also.
I have a 3 or a 4. You have to justify your answer either way. So tell me why 3 or why 4.
Well, 3 I didn't pick because Vincent doesn't know who Peter Barnes is. He doesn't. There's no way, we don't know for sure if he knows that's who he's coming to see. So if we just keep it general.
Gotcha. Could there be 1,000 people here for their first appointment, though?
Yes.
There could, but once he comes up, then he can, whoever the people are, then they can say, hey, this is who I am. And then he'll know who to say.
Any other thoughts on that, guys? Okay, we go back to the question, always looking at the stem. So you're down to 3 or 4, so go back to the stem. So I'm Peter Barnes. Is anyone here to see me? Let's go back to the stem to see if there's anything that justifies that. A new client is sitting in the crowded waiting room of a hospital outpatient clinic. Peter Barnes, social worker assigned to the case, comes out of the waiting room to meet the client for the first time. Okay, but he doesn't know which patient to greet. So then he's never met him. Okay, according to HIPAA, an appropriate and effective way to identify the client for the social worker to the waiting room and say, bingo. Is anyone here for their first appointment? Okay.
Wait, but I have a question.
Please ask.
What would happen? Because I know
I lost you.
in terms of, wait, can you hear me?
Yeah, I got you now. Go ahead.
Okay. So in terms of, why is it number 4 if, the way that I'm picturing it, right? Because when I approach scenarios, I like to visualize.
Yeah.
So the way that I'm picturing it is, let's say there are multiple people that were here for their first appointment. That just, I don't know, it seems like unorganized and messy, but I don't know if that's, do you know what I'm saying? I do overthink these questions.
Okay. So we go back to the question. Go back to the stem of the question. What it's asking me. Okay. And you can see the question. It could be written totally different on the test. So you have to really kind of get the concept, not just what the question is asking me. So the concept is according to HIPAA. Okay. So HIPAA is making sure that that he doesn't know, that no one knows he's here to see me. Okay. So what I asked her before is, so you'll get 12,000 people who walk up to you if it's their first appointment. But as long as they're sitting with you individually, no one else can hear, isn't that okay?
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense.
Okay. So the question is asking me according to the HIPAA regulations. And all this question is asking you is, do you know what HIPAA says?
And it's telling us that it's a crowded waiting room. So
is.
we already know there's going to be a lot of people there.
It is.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So again, so the question really, all they really want to know, the board is making sure, do you know what HIPAA says? Okay. So two obviously wrong ones, you knew the 1 or 2 weren't it, and then it comes down to 3 or 4. Go back to 3 and 4 to justify or explain why I chose that one. It's got to be up there somewhere. Now that applies to my vignettes. So I'm not a huge acronym person in general. And what I believe is always assess before act. And that is whether it's a community control, a community organization question, or a micro we're working one-on-one with the patient. You're always going to kind of assess before you do anything. And this again is just my HIPAA thing. So a lot of times you get a lot of those, you follow the acronyms, but not actually understand what the question is asking me. Okay. This is a, here we go. So this is just a basic knowledge question. When making a level of care determination, which criterion is primarily used in the behavioral health setting? So in behavioral health, I'm looking for the least restrictive for my client. So which of my criteria would I use? Their capitation, medical necessity, managed risk, or diagnostic groupings. I see a B. Everyone know what capitation means? Capitation means how much I pay. So it determines the pay or the fee that you pay the doctor or anybody else who's providing you services, and it's determined by the number of patients. So capitation is a fee base, and it has to do with like the big picture of healthcare. Okay, that's what sets my reasonable and customary rate is capitation. What's the cap? What's the most that it usually generates? Okay, so is it capitation, medical necessity, managed risk, or diagnostic groupings? I see a B, a B, a B. You got it. Medical necessity. You got it. Medical necessity. That's it exactly. Okay. And that's difficult many times. If you've ever worked with the insurance company or been in private practice and you're trying to suggest this, the HMO, the insurance company, is going to go with the least restrictive possible. But it is a medical necessity. Okay. Here we go. Again, ask questions anytime as you go along. I really, really don't mind. So let's look at this one. Okay. Okay. A social worker employed in a community mental health agency notices a neighbor in the waiting room. The worker should. What do you do when you notice the neighbor? A, ignore the neighbor's presence. B, greet the neighbor without starting a conversation. C, greet the neighbor and ask who he's there to see. Or D, greet the neighbor and introduce himself to all the staff members that might be present. And that is 2. Greet the neighbor without starting conversation. How are you? And then just leave it at that. Or hello, and leave it at that. You got it. That is 2. Good, good, good. So this word has come up a couple of times. Let's see how we do on this one. Put my mouse there. There we go. Okay. A community agency has a difficult competitive relationship with another agency in the area. The competition has led to frequent conflicts over city and state grants and has sapped the energy of both board of directors and executive directors. A new executive director decides it is time to resolve the conflict and feels that it may be possible to use cooptation as a primary strategy to resolve the conflicts. Excuse me. To implement this principle, the director might likely what? A, stimulate increased conflict initially, and then when everyone is fearful of the consequences, indicate a direct interest. Offer the agency an opportunity to participate in a newly funded program. Seek a meeting to mediate differences. Offer to resolve differences by agreeing not to compete on grants and contracts. Cooptation. What does that mean, and what's the best answer there? That's a relatively new word in the social work arena. So if you went to school a while ago, you might not know it. So let's see how we do. My phone's not lighting up. I'm not getting any 1, 2, 3s, or 4s. Come on.
Because we don't know what that means.
Well, you need to know what that means. So co-optation it's mainly used many times in government settings. So a coup d'etat, that old French word, means like the people will take over the government. A co-optation is when there are two agencies, one, or even in the city, one may be bigger and one may be smaller. And what you want to do is, especially if those agencies merge, you want to decrease dissent. That's a term you'll often see. You want it to just kind of calm down. We're going to get together. We'll figure it out. So a new executive director decides it's time to resolve the conflict and feel that it may be possible to use co-optation as a primary strategy to resolve the conflict. Okay. So what I'm going to do is just kind of bring that other group in, and I'm going to find the best way that we can, we can all be happy. I want to decrease dissent. So what do I do? How do I do that?
So then it would be 3, right?
Seek to mediate the differences. Okay, what are my other options? Let's see. Order to resolve differences by agreeing not to compete on grants and contracts. Can't do that one. 1, stimulate increased conflict initially, and everyone who's fearful of the consequences indicates an interest in finding a common ground. Not it either. 2, offer the other agency an opportunity to participate in a newly funded program that would add to their capabilities. Okay, and the answer is 3. Try to seek to mediate. So the goal of a co-optation is that I'm not going to take over. A coup d'etat is I'm going to take over. But the goal of this is we're going to work together. We'll figure it out, and we don't have to fight about it. I'm going to go do a little bit of pocket prep. We'll come back to those. Everybody use pocket prep?
Yes.
Pocket prep? So if you know these already, I just kind of like it because many people use it and it allows me to kind of explain why the answer is the answer it is.
Hey, Pam, somebody
Yeah.
that I was studying with asked me if there was anywhere else that we could get questions from besides like Pocket Prep and the APGAR book.
I have plenty. So if they want to sign up for a session with me, I'll gladly share.
Okay.
I don't know where you can get free ones. I mean, I've paid for mine, so I don't know. Does that make sense? And if you need questions as you leave, feel free to just send me an email and I'll gladly send you some.
Okay.
Okay. If you use this one, if you use Pocket Prep, I own all of them, so I kind of use the different ones, but always I suggest you narrow it down. It helps you work on if you're focusing on one specific area. And this one has a really good subject on social change. Okay. Does everybody know primary prevention, secondary, and tertiary?
Yes.
Okay. So what is primary prevention?
That's like preventative care.
It is. It is. This actually came around with the AIDS epidemic. So when
Mm-hmm.
AIDS first came along, this is where it started. That we figure if we could work on the primary prevention area, if we could just make sure people didn't get the AIDS, that would be what the best way to prevent it. Okay. So what's the answer to that one?
Early.
Oh, early treatments. It's already treatment. My primary
Yeah.
focus is trying to stop it.
Stop it. Yeah.
So
Oh.
what's my answer there? What's the best represents primary prevention?
Early treatment, clinical intervention.
It is my social service programs.
Yeah.
Okay. So group therapy, clinical intervention, early treatment are all prevention strategies, but primary prevention is making sure you don't get it to begin with. So if I have some really good social insurance programs, the public health department, it's covered, you have to pay for it, am I not going to prevent it?
Can you make that bigger? Can
I
you make
can, I sure can.
Okay.
Does that help? Take it off your
Yes,
screen.
that's better.
Okay, there we go. Okay. So that's a pretty typical way the tests are written if you haven't taken it yet. So yes, you need to know the definition, but then you have to apply the definition. Questions on that? Okay. We talked about this already. What is the best definition of co-optation? Let me hear some chime in. Come on.
Is it D?
A strategy addressed to address concerns.
I'm looking at A or D.
So I do not want to encourage dissent. So the goal is, it's a co-optation is almost the opposite of coup d'etat, where I came and took over and everybody's angry. A co-optation is when I want everybody to kind of work together, and it is C. You got it.
But
Okay.
what does dissent mean?
Dissent is not agreeing.
Oh, okay.
Okay. So dissent is, let me show the explanation. But dissent is not agreeing. If I came into it, so many times things are done by majority rules, and everyone's not happy. So a coup d'etat is I'm coming over, I'm taking care of things, but everyone's not happy. When it comes to a co-optation, I'm taking over, but I want everyone to really get along. Okay. So the goal is to decrease the amount of people who are complaining, and that's what consent is. Dissent, people who are complaining. Okay. A strategy designed to quiet dissent by redirecting the energies of dissent into less disruptive channels. So I'm taking over either way. This is what's going to happen. But these are what's I'm trying to make it as pleasant as possible for all parties involved. Okay. Again, which of the following would be an example of primary prevention? And that last one says polio, the polio vaccine. Come on, be brave. I don't bite. I really don't. I got a C.
You said it is C, or you said somebody said
I said I have a C. I didn't say the answer yet.
B?
It's a D.
Okay. So why B?
Because I was wavering between B and D.
Okay, so primary prevention. I am trying to prevent people from getting a disease. I'm trying to prevent it. Okay. Which the following is an example. So if I did STD for sex workers, that was my B, is that okay?
No, because they already having.
Well, they're sex workers. I'm trying to prevent it. It's the polio vaccine.
Trying to prevent polio.
Exactly. Exactly. So A, holding a class on diabetes for diabetics, they already have it. That would actually make it a second level, a secondary level. Okay. Okay, here we go. So which of the following is an example of the secondary prevention? We just did the first question, so. Okay. So explain to me why that's secondary. Somebody?
I feel like it's because it doesn't necessarily mean that they like have sexually transmitted diseases, but they are more at risk for it.
Okay.
So it's like addressing a problem that is likely to happen, but it hasn't yet. I don't know if that's like a good explanation.
Okay. And you can see the explanation. So secondary prevention strategies are aimed at preventing further risk or harm when condition is already present. Okay. So further is making, they're already sex workers. So if I were giving them condoms out, that might be a prevention. But the assumption is they might already have something. So my screening keeps from getting worse or them passing it to other people. Okay. So I'm old enough to remember that when AIDS first came out, and back in the day, before we took universal precautions, what we did is we really kind of put a big yellow or neon, folder or picture in their folder to recognize if they had HIV. So that's kind of how we used to do it. And at the time, we had lots of people who were prostitutes, street workers, who would kind of already come in with a sexually transmitted disease and kind of go back out and continue to spread the sexual transmitted diseases. And at that point, it was so new, we really kind of weren't sure how it was passed. So we know now differently, but at the time, things were very different then. So, which of the following is an example of a tertiary prevention, the third level?
Is it A?
Let's see here. Bingo. Would that not be pain management clinics as well? So now in our area, we have there's pain management clinics everywhere. Okay, that's tertiary prevention. So we know already that you may be addicted or have issues with your pain meds. So those clinics are the exact same thing. Okay. About this one. Was there a question? Go ahead and ask.
Oh, no. I'm just laughing because we keep seeing A everywhere now.
Okay, and that's not a pattern. People always think on the test that's a pattern. That is not. Continue to do that if you think it's A. Also, in general, when you take the test, do not spend more than a minute and a half on each question. If you are not sure, then flag it and come back. Okay, because you don't want to beat yourself up, because what happens if you have a couple of questions in a row that you don't know the answer, what are you begin to tell yourself?
Then you get nervous and tell yourself, "Oh, I don't know it. I don't know what I'm doing.
I'm stupid. I can't believe I did this. I'll never pass."
Yep.
So if we can avoid that by just skipping those questions and flag them and come back, most often there is a something down there that will kind of flag you later. Oh yeah, now I remember. Okay. So don't leave any questions blank. So go through, do it read the questions thoroughly. And certainly these questions are only content-based questions. These help you learn content. They don't really necessarily help you answer the question, because most of the questions are deeper than content. They're actually applying it. So these are just my content-based questions. And I'm making sure you understand the concept of community organization, as well as all of the indirect practices. Okay, so I got a B on that one. What else? What else can be defined as attempt to? Go with B. Got a D. Resourcing. Which can be which of the following can be best defined as an attempt to influence public policy? Okay. Got a B on that one. B, B, B. We'll go with advocacy. What is groupthink, guys? This is pretty new. Go ahead.
It's in group. I don't know exactly, but I remember reading it in the book, and I think it has something to do with like in group therapy, sort of like the consensus of what they think.
So it's not in group therapy.
Okay.
It really is that we will follow the group.
Okay.
And so a question on the test I've seen a couple of times is, let me show you what it looks like what it is first. Okay, so groupthink is you're sitting on the Friday board meeting and the boss says, you know what? I really think instead of having casual Fridays, we should just probably all come to work without pants. Something totally ridiculous. And everyone says, sure, no problem. Gotcha. That's great. And on the bottom, they're thinking, oh my gosh, no way, bad idea. But they're afraid to say anything because I want to kind of conform and go along with the group. So a question on the test I've heard a couple of times is the boss will put someone in there to play devil's advocate who will not agree with the group just to avoid groupthink. Okay. Because we don't want this. We want, for an agency, for a business, I want people who think on their own and not afraid to kind of dissent. But what we know is if everyone else agrees, we almost often agree. Okay. So if you and your agency or your friends are deciding on a restaurant and they all say a restaurant you hate, what most often do we do? According to groupthink, what will we do?
We would go along with it.
Go along with it. Okay, because we don't want to cause dissent. We just want to not rock the boat. So that is groupthink. Okay. Does that clear that up?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So that was advocacy on that one. Okay. So an ad hoc community group has formed to address the crime problem in their community. They meet at a local church and began to get to know each other. Which of the following stages of community organization are they in? Okay. So with any other group, as we get together, what is the first stage? Ad hoc means add-on. Okay. So whether they're doing whether it's a group process or a community process, what is the first thing I do to get to know each other?
Can you move it down?
Does that help or no? Let me make it smaller.
There you go.
Is that better?
Yeah.
I got a B. Is that a B? Oh, I'm sorry, an A. I actually said A. First thing we do. I say A, yes. Orientation always. Good. The term emergence, where does that come from? Anybody know?
Emergency.
Repeat.
Emergency.
No. Yes, it may come from that, but in general, that is one of our terms that you might see on the test. That comes from the racial identity. You familiar with that one? There's a model that talks about how we identify our race. It talks about, in general, all the races, but most often on the test, it's referring to Black people. And kind of there's a process. Let me share that with you. And I'll share the link with you. But as we go through, let's see. Okay. So first one is pre-encounter. The person identifies himself with white people and culture. The second one is encounter. Then you begin to work with people who look differently than you. 3 is immersion. That you may see that as emerge. Okay. The person begins to identify as Black. They get their Black culture and they don't like anything white. That is immersion. 4, you internalize. And then 5, your commitment to that. So those are the process. And emerge, most often when we see that word, you'll see that come from the racial identity. Immersion, emerge. Are you familiar with that process? I'll put that in the chat box. Okay. So, Sherry, I know you've taken the test before. Do you recall seeing any of these terms and maybe you just didn't know what they were?
Yes, I do. I remember seeing them.
Yeah. And that's what happens most often is kind of we don't know what the terms are. And that's what that means. There's a whole process on that. And again, I'll send you the slideshow. I'll put it in the Skype link. Okay. And what he does is he actually divides that up into several different. He talks about Black people, white people, and people who are biracial. I have not seen anything on the test or heard anything on the test where it actually talks about the other cultures. Most often, it is just about Black people. Okay. Okay. So this is actually, again, a knowledge question. It's based on what the Code of Ethics tells me. Which of the following is the most accurate with respect to social workers and political action? Give me some chime in. Hello, we there? Hello, hello. I got an A. I suggest that all of you, before you read the test, really know the Code of Ethics. Sometimes those questions are verbatim from the Code of Ethics. Okay, so you're really trying to make sure that you know it. And just talk about it a little bit. Sorry, just dropped my mouse there. So the Code of Ethics really addresses it. So you want to know what it says before I go there? Okay, so it talks about our ethical issues, and it talks about the last one talks about what we do, what we owe to the bigger society. And part of that is we're supposed to actually volunteer or give some pro bono work. We're supposed to do that. So we are the same as nurses or doctors. If there's an accident and they're supposed to, their Code of Ethics says you get out and help that person. Our Code of Ethics says the same thing. So most often if there's a car accident or things like that, I am not good at stopping the bleeding. However, I am good at knowing people and doing some of those crisis intervention. So my Code of Ethics is I'm supposed to do that. Okay. So what it says is social workers should engage in social and political action that seeks to ensure that all people have equal access to the resources. Okay, we should be aware of the impact of the political arena on practice and should advocate for changes in policy and legislation to improve social conditions. Okay, we should act to expand choices and opportunities for all. with special regard to the vulnerable, disadvantaged, oppressed. Okay. We should promote conditions that encourage respect for culture and social diversity. So there's a whole list of things that we're supposed to do. Back up on this one, social workers should provide appropriate professional services in public emergencies to the greatest extent possible. So if there's a fire in your area or something in your area, you're supposed to do that. That's what we do. We should facilitate informed participation by the public in shaping policies. Okay. So all of those are my ethical responsibilities to the broader society. And the Good Samaritan Act covers us the same way it covers doctors or nurses. So if I think that what I'm doing is best for this client, I'm using all of my skills, then a client decides later to sue me or to try to say, hey, you didn't do this, I'm going to say, I followed my code of ethics and did what I was supposed to do. Okay? So be sure you spend some time on those. Those are really important. Okay? So, does that change my answer? Should engage? Yeah. What is not a function of family? Come on, not a function of the Social Institute of Family.
Is it A?
To support the normative structure of society. You got it. Sorry, let me take that one. That is not a function. The function is to regulate social behavior, to promote economic and emotional maintenance for individuals, and to provide for primary socialization of children. Those are the rules of family. That's what we're supposed to do. Okay, I'm going to go through all of these. Let's skip those. Okay. Which of the following refers to the process of a community deciding its goals and strategies related to social issues? The process of deciding its goals. What is that?
Is it B?
Social planning? Bingo. Got it. Okay. Which of the following is the most accurate way to describe social work advocacy? Come on, chime in for me. Advocacy. When I'm fighting for my client, I'm advocating for my client. What am I doing? I got a B.
D?
What was that, a D or a B?
D.
D. It is B. So assisting my clients to build the skills. That is advocating. Okay. So what I want for them is to be able to advocate for themselves. So I'm going to help them advocate until they can do it for themselves. Okay. Which of the following is the best example of institutional influence on social policy? So social policy are things that eventually become laws. Those are our policies. So what's the best example of institutional influence? Come on, be brave. Chime in, just give me an answer, type in. Won't call your name, I promise. I got a C. Government structure. Institutional always means usually government facilities. Okay. So institutional influences on social policy involve things such as the structure of the institution, such as government, Some of my other institutions might be schools or universities or the prison system. Those are institutions. A community group has gotten together to address crime in their neighborhood. After getting acquainted, the group has a period of conflict, but is now agreeing on a specific item to accomplish. Which of the following strategies of community participation is this group currently in? The first group is orientation. They've gotten to know each other. They've met each other at least. So now they're ready to go forward, and they've found a specific item to work on. So what is that? I gotta see. Okay, that is emergence. So they have decided together that they've found out what they're going to work on. Now they're going to emerge. They're going to come out. Okay. That's the stage of community organization and participation. The community members agree on a course of action. They are merging. Okay. Emerge means to come out to if you've ever had a baby or seen anyone have a baby, when the head comes out, it's emergence. We talked about it when it comes to kind of even that racial diversity, when you kind of figure out who you are and you're coming out, that's emergence. Okay, that's the definition of the word. That's all that means. Okay. A group of concerned citizens have gotten together to make sure everyone in the community has a chance to vote. After coming together as a group, the group had difficulty agreeing on how many items, but finally agreed that had difficulty agreeing on many items, but finally agreed on the informal flyers about registration deadlines are all one. Okay, so let's try that again. But have finally agreed that informational flyers about registration deadlines are one recommendation all can agree on. Now they're in agreement and can explain why. So which of the following stage, what stage is this group in? Your reinforcement. They've emerged, they come with a decision, and now they've agreed on this, so now they are reinforcing what they believed. That's reinforcement. Which of the following is the most accurate statement about community development? Anybody? What's the most accurate? Is that a D? It's a long-term process, okay? That's the most accurate. Community development takes time to change things. Okay. Community organization and development is a long-term process. It seeks to address not only immediate issues, but larger issues, okay? So I really want to kind of address things that are going in the community. It takes a long time. I got to make sure that I get all of the powers to be involved, but I'm not expecting it to be a short-term issue. The community has been the same way it's been many times for many, many years, and though there is unhappiness or we want to change things, it really might take a long time. Okay, so one of the following best describes, which of the following best describes the way in which the community can harness its collective power to tackle issues relevant to the community? Which is the best way the community can harness, get together, all of its powers, collective powers working together to tackle issues. What's the best? Okay. The best, community organization, planning, development, or participation. Harness its collective powers. Okay. Organizing. And to get together and organize. Community organization refers to the effort a community makes to harness collective powers to tackle issues. If I can get all of the community on the same page, okay, if we can do that, if we can organize, then definitely we can all fight together and be on the same page. So those are most often the types of questions you'll see when it comes to community organization. I just want to make sure that you really understood some of those basic concepts. Okay. Let's go back and do a few more practice questions. Any questions on that, guys? Did I introduce you to some things that maybe you hadn't heard of before? Okay, let's go back and let's pick up some other questions. Okay, so then let's just go back and pick up some. And as I go through, if there's a question you specifically like, oh my goodness, let's answer that one. I am so good with that, so let me know. Again, I suggest that you read the APGAR book. She's explained out many of the details in that chapter, so I really, really like that. If you don't have it, let me know. I'll gladly send you my link. Okay, let's look at this one. This is a pretty good one also. When it comes to kind of those community organization questions, make them bigger. Okay, so number 8. Marta is a social worker employed at a vocational training program that serves many Russian immigrants. When these immigrants complete their training and they're ready to work, they often found they cannot obtain work permits. A group of Russians is planning a peaceful demonstration outside the Capitol building to draw attention to their situation. Marta plans to participate in the demonstration. Her supervisor tells her she may not do so. The agency is partially dependent on state grants, and her supervisor does not want an agency employee to be seen at the demonstration. Marta argues with her supervisor. What reasons would Marta not give for attending the demonstration? Okay, chime in there for me. Why would she not give? So the reasons. What reasons would she? What would she say that would not? And those questions, that means that there's one that it's a not question. So the other 3 are reasons that she could give.
Can it get any bigger? I can't see it.
Yeah, it sure can.
Okay.
Here we go.
Okay, thanks.
Here's some chiming in. I got a 3. Anybody else? Okay, and you are correct. So the agency should uphold all government rules and actions. So what rules or actions is she breaking?
And it doesn't say anything about rules or actions in the vignette.
Okay, so what's my answer?
Well, it was 3, but I was just saying it was easy to eliminate it because of that.
Perfect, exactly. So I was able to justify that because there's nothing in there. Perfect, got it. Okay, number 9. Just before I go forward, so are you familiar with the hierarchy in agencies? Okay, so we don't see a lot of those on there, but often there are a few questions that talk about the hierarchy. So if I am if the question talks about being a worker, I work in the agency, then I'm going to go up the chain. I cannot go to the board of directors. I cannot go to the CEO. I have to go to my immediate boss. Okay, so if something happens at a level that is, I'm concerned, I go to my immediate boss first, which most often, many times, is then it may be the clinical director, it may be just a director. Then there's a CEO. I'm going to go up the chain. So I don't go and call the CEO. I don't go and call the board of directors. I go up the chain, up the hierarchy. So then my CEO, my executive director, she answers to the board of directors. So that's how it works. So make sure that you know that when those questions come up of like, what do you go to? In general, when it comes to the questions about when I go to a supervisor, The only times I really go when it has to do with transference and countertransference, those are the clinical reasons I go. And other than that, it has to do with then organizational issues. Okay, so if something happens in the organization that I see is not fair or not right, or maybe even, blatantly wrong, I'm going to go up the chain of command. It's always important to know who the boss, who's next, because if you go up to the boss without addressing it with your current boss, you're out. So you've got to know that for the test as well. Okay, so let's look at number 9. Does that make sense, how that works? Okay, let me get some feedback on number 9. Come on, take a guess.
Well, based off what it said, I don't know. Wouldn't it just start off with one,
Okay.
and then if he pressures the situation, then tell him to talk to your supervisor and not the executive director?
Okay, so what's the vignette? What's going on here?
He wants special privileges.
He
because
sure
he has a
does. He's on the board. He wants special privileges. So what do I do with that? What was your answer?
I said I would start with 1.
Yeah, we do.
Because it's agency. I mean, you don't just go past everybody else.
Just tell her no. Okay, so would my director be okay with me telling the person no?
I would assume, yeah, because that's yeah.
Yeah.
Ethically, that's not what you do. Is you don't go past people. But if somebody pressures, then maybe go up to your boss or the director.
What'd you say? Repeat again. So what did you say?
I would start off with 1 because it's ethically you shouldn't just go past just for relationship purposes. But then if they continue to press the issue, then maybe go up to the executive director or your supervisor, right?
Okay. So the answer to that one is 2. Okay, because you're just a lowly agency social worker. Your pay grade doesn't allow you to make that decision. Does that make sense?
Yeah, but I feel like we just went past the fact that we should be talking to our supervisor before going to the director.
And it doesn't really kind of it doesn't address that the board of director wants to show the favoritism. So why not talk about the policy? Because they're aware of the policy in the rules.
Okay. So I don't have the hierarchy says if someone's going to turn down the board member, it has to be this person who is ahead of me.
No.
Okay, so this is the hierarchy issue. So if this person comes to me, they've got a personal relationship with his involvement, I've showed up for every board meeting, blah, blah, blah. I don't have the pay grade. It really comes to hierarchy. I don't get to say that. That's something my boss would have to say. I don't get to make that decision. So I'm hoping my boss will say the same thing, but however, I don't get to make that decision. Okay, talk to me, questions? Because that's differently than most of us think, because the code of ethics always says go to the person. However, when it comes to indirect practice, my boss is the one who makes those decisions. Yes, no, maybe? Okay, you're also quiet. Okay, let's see here. Let's go to number... Yeah, if you see one that you're dying to answer, just let me know. Okay. Number 8, Marta is a social worker employed at a vocational training program that serves many Russian immigrants. When those immigrants complete, we did that one, didn't we? Sorry.
Sorry.
Let's look at this one. This is a typical first question. Jessica is a social worker at a mental health center. She schedules a client's first interview in the evening and later realizes no other workers will be in the office at the time. Jessica should. What do we do?
Two.
That is
Oh, wait,
correct.
sorry.
Go ahead.
Never mind.
Okay,
sorry, I thought that she scheduled 2 people. Never.
So what do we do with that?
Go with number 2.
I have number 2. I'm just going to look at my pop-ups. Okay, let's see here. Number 2. So A, ask her supervisor to stay in late in the evening as she will not be alone in the building. So probably not. 2, reschedule the interview when other clients and support staff will be present. 3, go ahead with the interview because rescheduling might convey a sense of unreliability to the client. Or 4, give a client a choice to whether or not to reschedule. Okay, so I'm going to rule out 3 and 4. I'm not safe. I go back to 1 or 2. So ask the supervisor to stay or reschedule the interview. What are my best choices there? What's best for my client in that one?
Okay, 2.
Is it best for my client to reschedule?
No, the best for the client is ask the supervisor to stay late.
Okay, so then what does it matter who it's best for? My supervisor or me or my client? What do I do this for?
You're doing it for the client.
Okay, so then what's the best answer?
Ask the supervisor to stay late.
It is. Okay. So that's one that many people have are not used to because this is kind of different from what we normally do. Okay. 23. Does anybody know this one?
Are we on 23? Is that what
I'm sorry, 23, yes.
Oh.
So in the summer after his junior year of college, David began his first full-time job and established his first independent apartment. He saw friends, but would not try dating after recently lost his girlfriend. He managed his responsibilities well, but the first time found himself lying, worrying each night about what went wrong with the girl. He's feeling no one else will want me again. When he returns to college, his insomnia continues. He isolates himself in a dorm room between classes and no longer comfortable speaking in class and resists his friends' invitations to parties. David requests an appointment with the University Health Center. What is the best rationale for recommended brief treatment? And this is not a community organization question, just in general. What's the best reason for that? The answer to that one is 1. David's symptoms appear reactive to a situation and resolvable in a short time. Okay, just short thing going on. Okay. This is number 33. The Johnson couple was previously in family therapy with a social worker. The couple is now divorcing in a custody dispute, and the worker's psychotherapy notes have been court-ordered for disclosure. Which statement best reflects the worker's legal obligation in response to the court order? So before you answer that, someone tell me, what does the Code of Ethics say about reacting to a court order?
We have to abide by the court order.
Okay. What's the first thing I'm going to do?
If the client's consent.
Not necessarily. First thing I'm going to do is actually just try to
Make it now.
just say, repeat.
If it's gonna be a problem, can we ask the court to keep it to where it's not, everybody's not seeing it?
You got it. I'm going to either I'm going to plead this is privileged communication and say, Judge, I really don't want to share this much. It's privileged communication. These notes are private. Blah blah blah. The judge often will just say, go ahead. You have to share anyway. And then I'm going to make sure I follow that. I'm not going to jail for anybody, and that's not going to happen. And even if the goal is to be great, if this client will sign a release. However, if they don't sign a release, am I going to just share it anyway?
For the court, yes.
I am. I'm not going to jail for
Yeah.
anybody.
Right.
The court order. So a subpoena is most often from an attorney. My subpoena says, hey, would you please share notes with me? That's when I'm going to say, let me talk to my client, or no, thank you, I've got that right. When it comes to a court order, I am saying, yes, Judge, I'm not spending one night in jail for a client, ever, ever, ever. So I'm always going to follow the court order. Okay. So then which statement talks about my obligation in response to a court order? Which of these is the correct answer?
Number 2.
That is correct. That is correct. The HIPAA privacy rule does not apply in this case, as privilege is governed by the state law, so psychotherapy notes may still be discovered in litigation. Okay? What's the rule about psychotherapy notes? Are they always a part of the court order?
Yes.
They are not.
No,
So
they're kept
No.
separate.
go ahead. Say that. Go ahead.
They're kept separate.
They're kept separate. So in this case, the judge specifically asked the worker psychotherapy notes have been court ordered. So most often they're separate. And if the court order does not request them specifically, you do not send the psychotherapy notes.
Oh, okay.
Okay. So they're always kept separate. That's covered in the Code of Ethics as well. So most often you're working for kind of a big company maybe, or there are other people seeing those psychotherapy notes, you keep them separately. And unless the client or the court specifically asks for those, we don't send those. Okay. Questions? Okay, I'm just going to go over a few more. Kind of specifically just address. Again, feel free to ask me any questions. So look at this one. Susan at number 101. Susan is a social worker at an EAP, Employee Assistance Program. One of their clients is the town fire department. Okay, so 2 days ago, the fire chief had a heart attack in the station in the presence of other firefighters. The 2 firefighters attempted CPR when someone else called the EMTs. Despite their best efforts and those of the EMTs, the chief died. Chief. The assistant fire chief contacted Susan, saying that he and his crew needed some help dealing with their feelings about this terrible event. Some firefighters found it hard to return to the station. Others who did come to work were preoccupied with the loss and found it hard preoccupied with the loss, a sense of helplessness, and guilt they had failed our chief. Susan arranged for a team of EAP workers to meet with the crew in groups to help them manage their reaction and try to move on. This form of group interaction following a trauma is what? What is this called?
Critical incident.
What was that?
2.
Managed care, number 4.
No, it's 2. It's critical incident debriefing. Okay, there was a critical incident. The people were all there. This is really difficult for them. So all we're going to do is kind of go back and debrief. That's what that's called. Okay. It's not mandated. It's not managed care. It's not a group therapy. They just lost this guy and they were all there. They feel guilty. That is a critical incident debriefing. Okay. Okay. 105. Zach is a social worker on the HIV/AIDS clinic treatment at a large urban hospital. He meets with Saul, an undocumented immigrant from Colombia who is HIV positive. Saul does seasonal work under the table for a landscaper. He has no health insurance and receives no public benefits for himself, his wife, or his children. Zach would like to help Saul apply for benefits, anticipating that his HIV status may compromise his ability to work in the future. What initial referral should Zach suggest to Saul? Use some feedback there.
Four.
Undocumented immigrant from Colombia. Does he get any services?
What about number 2?
Yes, exactly. Exactly. And that's the biggest concern always, is that people always say, oh my gosh, people are coming over and taking our benefits. Is that true? No, if you're not here legally, what do you get?
Nothing.
Nothing. Your children may. If your children were born in the United States, will they get benefits?
If they were born here, yes.
Exactly. If they are citizens. However, if they are not, they get nothing. So that really is making sure that you understand that you don't fall for that commonplace where immigrants come over and take everything. They don't qualify. If you're not a citizen of the USA, you do not qualify. So you can't apply for SSI, you can't apply for food stamps, and you can't apply for Medicaid. The only thing we can do is suggest he look for an immigration lawyer. Okay? Questions on that? Okay, we're going to wrap up tonight. I'm going to turn my camera back on and get that. Any questions? Did you find tonight helpful? Did you find some things that maybe you weren't aware of before? Any questions? You want us to ask me anything? Please feel free to ask me. I don't mind at all. I just want to help you get through this process and expose you to some things that may not be covered in some of the standard reading materials that you always read.
Do you do individual tutoring?
I do. My individual rate is $25 an hour, and you can buy as little or as much as you want. Okay. The material is included. Okay. I'm booked about 2 weeks out. So if you want to email me, feel free. My emails. I'll put my phone number there. I don't mind. You can text me or call me.
Thank you.
No problem. And as long as Ashley passes, I have a really great job of so most of my students pass. So Ashley, I need you, okay?
Hey, we got
Not about you, it's about me, okay? Let's just face facts.
But I did see some improvement. I did the ABGAR.
Okay.
and graded, and I did see an improvement.
Very good. Very good. Very good. And the goal, again, general, and everything on my site is always, you can get any free information, I have questions there, but the goal is in general to just make sure that you always assess. That is, if I could tell you one thing, to always assess, because what happens if, unless feelings are the biggest issue, I'm going to assess. So whether it's a community, whether it's a group, whether it's an individual, I'm going to assess. I opened up the camera today. If I was crying, what would you say to me?
I have to find out, what are you crying for?
Yeah, God, at least acknowledge my feelings.
Mhm.
So most of the time, almost all the time, the answer is in the stem. So I'm looking at, the client is crying, or the client is very upset. Then I'm going to respond with an answer that deals with those feelings. Other than that, I'm going to assess.
You
There are
said
lots of
almost every time the answer is within the stem? Almost?
So when it comes to those vignettes, yes,
Mhm.
it comes to
Okay.
those vignettes. Now, some of them are knowledge-based, that you really have to know some things. I can't pretend you're going to take this test without having a good grain of knowledge. You have to have some knowledge. But when it comes to the vignettes, what most often happens are too obviously wrong, too obviously close. Okay. So then when you go back to pick those two, go back to the question and tell me what in the question, what in the stem helps me decide between those two.
Okay.
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 That's the one key I can give you, is it's in there. They're not trying to trick you. They're trying to see if you know what you're supposed to know. If you haven't looked at the KSAs, go down and look at the KSAs. That's on the Code of Ethics website, and the ASWB website. It's on my Facebook page also. Just kind of go down. Do you know this? Do you know this? Do you know this? That's the standard that you should know. But 60 to 65% are vignettes, and that's applying that knowledge. Okay. So with my first questions, assess. I don't go to the doctor's office and they give me, I say I have a headache, and he writes me a script for hydrocodone. He's going to ask me some more questions. So don't ever act without assessing first. Okay. If the option is do nothing, that's never an option. We can't just do nothing. Okay. On my site, also on my Facebook page, there's if you look in the files, there's one of that talks about how to look in the stem, and there's some tips in there of kind of what to look for and what not to look for when it comes to the stem. Okay. I don't mean to trivialize it. It's not as hard as we think. They're not trying to trick you. The question is, oftentimes you're missing something in the question. So go back and reread, understand the question. Okay, questions at all? Can I help you, please? So you have my phone number. It's 423-645-6265. Be sure they always follow me on Facebook. I have lots of information out there that is free. And if you're interested in some individual sessions, especially to get closer to your test, we'll go over that. I will put everything in this chat box as we leave. This video will download and it'll be there. It'll be there for 30 days. If you forget to download it, you can come back and get it later. Just ask me. I'll have a link for it. And everything we use today, I'll make sure that I actually send you a link to it as well. It's on my Google Drive, so you're feel free to just click on it and go with the questions and the answers. It's been a pleasure, guys.
Thank
Bye.
you.
Thank you.
Thank you.